Hello again everybody, Brandon here, coming to you from the studio and the gallery again today. If you are new to the channel, this is the channel where I show you and walk through all the processes that I use in creating my paintings. If you want to see some future videos, please subscribe to the channel. And let's get to this video here, which is another one of my small canvas paintings. Been cranking out a lot of these here lately. This time we're going to look at Sunset Beach. Let's go ahead and roll it. Alright, what I have here is a 6x8 canvas we're going to be working on here, and I'm starting with a 1/2" flat brush. This is a mix of some raw umber with a touch of medium red in it and just a hint of titanium white to create like a deep kind of purplish mauve kind of color here. Then we'll start on this horizon. And we're going to just fade this color into adding a little more titanium white to the mix. And then as I get a little further up, we're going to start introducing some yellow ochre here in to start to orange this out just a little bit. And then we're going to keep moving up here and trying to work quickly and fading this as this paint is still wet. And we're going to add just a little more titanium white towards the top. And then blend this in as best we can. Now while I've got this color nice and wet still on the brush here, I'm going to come in here and bring in to where it will be our reflections on a lot of where this water is washing up on this beach. So we're going to scrub this color in down through here. And then down in here in the bottom left corner, we're going to bring in a little bit more of that raw umber with a touch of red in it to darken that corner up a little bit. That'll be the end of our water reflections. I'm going to drop my horizon line down here just a little bit with that same raw umber and red, touch of titanium white mix here to darken up that bottom just a little bit. Now this little triangle of area here on the left side, I'm just going to add some titanium white to that and brighten it up a little bit and put that color in. This area of water up in here is going to have some more sky reflection on it as well, but for right now I'm just going to drop this color in on top of that. Now for the rest of this ground area of the beach here, we're going to go into a lot of raw umber and just a little bit of red to it and come in with a really dark value and put that in here to be our sandy beach area, because again this is going to be a sunset scene here right at dusk with just a tiny bit of sun peeking over the hill up there. So a lot of this is going to be pretty dark. We'll eventually put in a little bit of highlights on the dirt here as well. But for right now I just want to get this dark color scrubbed in to cover up the rest of the canvas here that we're working with. Try to get all of my brush strokes out of this so they're not really that visible, and blend that in as best I can. Now I'm going to lighten up the horizon here of the water highlights here. This is the original color of that raw umber with a touch of red in it, but a lot of titanium white here to give us a really rosy cream kind of light value here. Then we'll put in up on the horizon here, and then into this area that is mostly where the water is. This spot below it where the reflection of the sky is most visible is just where the beach itself is going to be kind of wet and is reflecting that sky. I'm going to put in a little bit of a distant tree line here that is, for the most part, this is all raw umber. And we're just going to touch in a distant tree line. There's a hint of red in this mix, in this paint mix as well. It's probably not crucial, but I do have a little bit of red in here. Using the corner of my brush to just kind of dot in the tops of what would be some trees back there. And as I move to the right edge of the canvas, just make them a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. Just a little bit of perspective of a tree line down the edge of the beach here. I'm switching to a smaller brush here. This is a little 1/8 inch angled brush, going into that same dark color that my tree line here is, mostly again raw umber with a hint of red in it. And we're going to draw in a couple of shade lines of what would be like areas where the sand, the beach sand, kind of drops off from one level to another. Is it like where the high tide would come up to? Maybe this is a low tide picture scene here. It's actually a photo that my wife took when we were walking the beach one evening down at Kiawah Island here off the coast of South Carolina. But there's usually a couple of levels to the sand here on the beach of where the tide comes up to, so I'm just drawing these lines in to create some shadows of where those essentially different plateaus of sand are on the beach. Make them pretty thin in the distant, and then just widen them up a little bit as they come closer to the front right corner of the panel here. Just again keeping that perspective good, and then essentially just using this color as a shade darker value color to scribble in some areas of interest, just here to break up the monotony of the sand on the beach itself is all we're really doing. I'm going to darken this mix up with just a touch of black into the areas that's closest to the foreground here on the right to make it just a little darker. I just want the darkest of darks to be the closest to the viewer here. And then I'm going to move that color in right here in front of me. This is going to be some of the basically the shaded areas behind what would be little clumps of foam on the beach that we're going to put in. Foam that's washed in from the waves crashing here, or whatever we've got going on. I'm just randomly touching some places here again to just break up that monotone sand that we've got going on. Who knows what's laying out here? Could be just dips in the dirt where people have walked, could be seashells, who knows. I'm going to bring that same color over here. I'm going to add a hint of blue and red into this to purple it out just a little bit. And start touching that into the reflection here in the wet part of the sand where the water is washed in, because again this is going to be like shady spots behind mostly what is foamy areas that we'll create from the water that's washed in. And then just areas where the water itself is creating small waves is coming in, we use the same color and just kind of lightly trace it up through here. Up here in these top corners is very, very far away from the viewer. On the top of this horizon, we're just going to bring this color across. There's a lot of, from my source photo, it looks like there's maybe a distant shoreline up here. I don't even know what it is, but you just see this dark line across the top of the horizon up there that I'm going to bring across right in here to this tree line. And then into the water itself, I'm just going to basically tap and drag this color through here to create choppy, riffly water looking across there. It's low tide again, so we don't have a lot of big waves here, but you do have a little bit of a breeze out there that's creating this, and it's most evident the flatter the water is on the horizon away from you, you see a lot of that darker area in there. So I'm going to put most of it here in this top corner of the water. And then we do have a little bit of one wave here that's kind of starting to crash in. It's got a shade line on it. I'm just going to use that same color and scrub in essentially the shaded line that the wave that's starting to crash in is creating. And we'll come back and highlight the top of that before we're done. As my brush is losing paint here, I'm just kind of scrubbing that color across some of that water there. Now I'm going to add a little bit more red into our mix here that we were painting this beach with, because we're going to have a setting sun that's just barely peeking over that tree line. I'm going to bring some red in here that is showing a little bit more of where that sunshine is going to be just sort of reflecting off of that dirt. Maybe add a touch of yellow ochre to it to orange it out just a little bit as well. And scrub that color in on the tops of these plateaus of dirt that's coming down through here. And any areas here on this sand that the light from the little bit what's left of the sun we're going to have is kind of reflecting off the sand here. And put just a hint of titanium white into that mix now to give it just a little bit of a sheen to the top areas of that. Brighten it up just a little bit. Now I'm going to move to the liner brush and go back into our dark mix here that we've used mostly raw umber and red, and then I said I purpled it out just a little bit with a little bit of blue and a little bit more red here, and I'm going to draw in with this liner brush the kind of darkest line here that this wave that's crashing in is creating a little bit of a shadow. So it's a little bit wider here in the far left edge where it's closest to the viewer, and then it'll thin out as it moves away from you. And still with the liner brush here, I'm going to create some little marks here in the area of wet sand that any number of things going on in here. On the source photo I've got, there's all kinds of little undulations and things going on in this sand and this dirt that's creating a shadow. So I'm just going to blot in a bunch of random stuff here in that shadow color to give those indications. I'm going to go into some titanium white now and a little bit of blue, a tiny touch of red. So we have a kind of a real pale purple color here that we're going to use to create some of our tops of our foam that's washed in here on the beach. And right on top of a lot of these areas that we've created a little shade or shadow, especially these bigger shadow areas, we're going to just drop this color in that will create our little foamy areas that are sitting here washed in on the beach, that are sitting there on the sand and on this area that is reflecting the skyline up. And I'm mostly going to do this on the areas that I created larger shadow areas, a lot that smaller stuff even if it is this foam that's doing it, you can't really see the highlight of it. But I don't know what all that, like I said, it could, any small undulations in the dirt down there creating those shadows. And it's not all foam, so you don't have to worry about all of them. Just hitting the bigger ones and the larger ones with it. And then using the same color to hit the tops of these shade lines where these waves are coming in on the beach. Brighten up that edge just a little bit to give us the idea that that is some water that's crashing in over, that's creating that shadow line. And then here on that water that's closest to the viewer, I might just use that same color to highlight a little bit of reflections. And that's about all we're going to do for the water itself. Now we need to move in here to our setting sun. This is back to my 1/8 inch angled brush, and I've got a touch of medium red and yellow ochre in here and some titanium white, and I'm going to just kind of fade in a little bit of an orangey color here right here at the top of this tree line. Just brush it out a little bit. And then I'm going to get some medium yellow, so some titanium white, put in just the top edge of a sun that is falling behind those trees right there. We don't want to see much of it because it's almost gone. And then once we have our little piece of our sun in place, we're just going to fade out some more of that orange color that we've created. I've added a little titanium white to that orange color we've got here now to come right underneath the sun and fade that out a little bit brighter of a deal here. Blend that in with the finger a little bit to drag that color out away from where that setting sun is. A little bit darker orange now that I am pulling a little further away from that. And then we'll move up in here into the sky area and just fade this oranger color into our skyline here. Add a little bit more yellow to that mix. And I'm just going to kind of work that color out, start to add in a little bit of titanium white to it as I move away. And just kind of fade that and blend that out. Maybe one last highlight pass here now that I've got my sun in place of where it would be catching the tops of this sand. And that is really all I'm going to do. We're going to call that a finished product here of our Sunset Beach. Using a reference photo on this one again, but hope you've got something you're happy with if you've painted along. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.